Great, thank you, and welcome back, everyone. I would like to spend just very few minutes saying a little bit about the trajectory of living in love and faith within the Church of England, sort of where's all this going? And again, to do that, let me share a PowerPoint. So the last bit of the PowerPoint, so what's happening next? Just to say that the large group of which Isabel was a part of 40 or so people, their job is done. They were led by the Bishop of Coventry, Christopher Coxworth, over 3 years of working together. And now there's a new group which is taking forward this process of getting the whole church to engage with the resources. And that group is chaired by the Bishop of London, Sarah Mullally, and it's called the Next Steps Group, which is exactly what it's doing. And it has a number of tasks in relation to living in love and faith. First and foremost being partly what we're hoping to do today, which is encouraging participation in learning together across the whole church at all levels. And they're being helped by LLF advocates being appointed in every diocese. And of course, you have a number of advocates, including Bishop Lee, Chris Dobson, and a whole team of people helping that happen in the diocese. And so many dioceses have one or more LLF advocates and then a wider reference group. And that participation can happen in lots of different ways. We're not being prescriptive in local churches, in youth groups, chaplaincies, perhaps several churches doing it together, perhaps churches in deaneries or deaneries themselves or across the diocese. But that's the first and at the moment, the key task of that group. But secondly, I did say at the very beginning that this is radical in the sense that we are hoping that as we learn and study and relate to each other more deeply regarding these questions, that we will be able to contribute to the church's discernment of a way forward for the church concerning some of these questions. And so a key element will be, especially for the bishops, but for all of us, of course, to listen attentively to what's emerging from the learning. And that means that we need to be gathering feedback as people engage with the resources. We're doing that in a number of different ways. There's an online survey questionnaire, which we hope everyone who engages with the resources will complete. And then we're also going to be doing some focus group work later on in the year. As themes begin to emerge, we'll want to explore those perhaps a little more deeply through focus groups across the country. And we're also inviting people to respond creatively to their experience of learning and to what they're learning. So we're hoping, if this is about being human, being created in the image of a creator and creative God, that we can also respond creatively. Sometimes these questions are so deep and so personal that sometimes words are not adequate. And so we're hoping people will, perhaps they'll paint, perhaps they'll compose music, perhaps they'll write poems or prayers in response to what they're learning. And to do that perhaps also as a group, maybe take a photo of the group, record some highlights of the group's learning. So really we get a holistic, a head and a heart picture of what the church across the country is learning from these resources. The group, the Next Steps group, will also be thinking about what have we heard and how do we understand biblically and theologically about what it means to be church with our diversity and differences. And then, of course, next year, we'll be thinking about how then do we move into the future, having done this listening, doing that discerning together at all levels again, but of course, with the College and House of Bishops and with members of General Synod. The sort of participatory element is through the whole of this year. So people have all of this year to engage with the resources and beyond, of course, but in terms of feeding back to the discernment process, that will end at the end of sort of January time next year. So you do have all of this year to engage. And the sort of discernment moving forward process, again, will take up much of next year, so that towards the end of next year, when Synod meets probably in November, there'll be a sense of direction emerging in relation to this. So there is a sense of direction, there is a forward momentum, but we are all really hoping that people will focus on deepening our understanding and our learning and our listening together before jumping to conclusions, before jumping to thinking about what next. So that's all I wanted to say. And I think, Chris, you and the team are going to say a bit more about locally how things will progress.
Right, now we've had a taste of LLF, and so how are we going to contribute to this locally, and how do we see it rolling out within this diocese? How are the conversations going to happen, and what support is there? So as you'll have gathered, LLF involves conversations in small groups and takes place over 5 weeks with an optional 6-week. We envisage that most of these will happen in September onwards, just into the very beginning of next year. And that part of the reason for this is that it'll give time maybe for churches to have a chance to look at the pastoral principles first, which might be helpful. So groups will happen over the next year, well, few months, but it may be that people want to engage with them earlier, and we do realise that. How will they happen? In small groups with 5 participants, and we would suggest a facilitator, because this really enables the groups to function well and to be safe spaces where people can be brave. And the groups can be in parishes, chaplaincies, chapters, amongst school governors. We may run some diocesan groups for those who want to participate, but not in their own parishes. And we're putting in support that people can draw on in terms of facilitators and the chaplaincy, and of course the advocates. And as Eeva has mentioned, feedback from groups is really important. Just looking at the different groups that are involved, we have an advisory group. There are already some trained facilitators, and there will be locally trained facilitators, and we're also putting in chaplains, and all of these support the local groups. So the advisory group is a group of people, very diverse group of people from different perspectives, who are going to meet with the advocates monthly, and they'll act as a sort of sounding board for us and be the eyes and ears for us as to how LLF is being received. They'll let us know any problems that are developing and how engagement is going. And also perhaps let us know of any misconceptions or anxieties that are going on. But they're there to really help us and enable us to do what we're doing. Facilitators. We've already trained quite a few facilitators, and we will be training more. And the facilitators are there to enable the groups. They're not there to participate in the groups, they're there to enable the group. And they also will be able to point to further resources, particularly the chaplains, if need be. If anybody finds that the conversations have raised difficult issues for them and they want somebody to talk to. And also they'll be encouraging the feedback, and some of the facilitators are going to help us in training parish-based facilitators. So we would encourage people in parishes perhaps to identify people who might be able to facilitate, and maybe to get together with other parishes so that you can swap facilitators. But we will be providing quite a bit of training, particularly in September. We also have the chaplains who are there to offer safe spaces for anybody who does need to talk because of issues that have been raised for them, or things that have touched them very deeply. And the chaplains will be able to offer 2 one-hour sessions, and if anybody needs further help, they can signpost them on to where this would be available. They can also offer prayer and spiritual support as requested, and we have a couple of 2 to 3 chaplains available today, as Chris said earlier. The final thing I want to just mention is prayer support. You might have noticed on the diagram earlier that everything is held within prayer, and we feel that this is really, really important, both that we approach things prayerfully, but that also we pray for the whole process and the journeys that we're all making. So if there are people who would like specifically to pray for LLF as it goes forward, please would you contact me on our diocesan address, llf@bristoldiocese.org, and we will enable you to take that forward. We'll keep you in touch with what's going on and needs for prayer. Thank you.